and all the other scientists, or we could name a lot of them. Now there's also David Bohm. They all emphasize the importance of intuition. And it comes, where does it come from, you know? I try to say that, yes, it comes not from the surface dimension, which is how things appear. It comes from this deeper dimension, where all the information is already stored. It's all there. It's implicated. It's folded in, as Bohm would say, you know. But whatever it is, it's given already. Everything, all the laws of the universe, the way it evolves, are given in that deeper dimension. They are Akashic laws. They are laws of the Akashic Field.
You got to accentuate the positive. Wow, I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of deliberate creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
If you feel like that's what you want to do.
Hello and welcome to another show, Accentuating the Positive with Karen Swain. As always, wonderful to be with you all again. Well, I'm so honoured, really, to introduce you to have Dr. Ervin Laszlo on the show with me today. Welcome, Dr. Laszlo.
Karen, so nice to be with you on this show. Thank you.
He's and we're very honoured at the Higher Self Expo. He's one of our speakers at the Higher Self Expo, where we'll be speaking about where science meets spirituality. And Dr. Laszlo is well versed in this topic, let me tell you, with a lifetime of accolades. Your life is extensive. I really don't know where to start with you, but I'm going to start by reading out a bit of your bio.
It's okay, but you do my bio, it's going to take a long time.
Oh, I'm not going to read all of it, just some of it. I've just taken out bits of it.
Few verses enough. Okay.
Your speaking topic at the Higher Self Expo is the Akashic Field, which I'll ask you about. But an author and co-author and editor of over 101 books that have appeared in around 24 languages, Dr. Ervin Laszlo is the founder director of the Laszlo Institute of New Paradigm Research, Italy. He has written several hundred papers and articles in scientific journals and popular magazines, and has had an extensive career, winning many awards and prizes for his work throughout his life. Dr. Laszlo spent his childhood in Budapest, Hungary, and was a celebrated musical child prodigy, excelling in piano, doing public appearances from the age of 9. He received a grand prize at the International Music Competition in Geneva, which allowed him to leave Hungary and begin an international concert career, first in Europe and then in America. We were just chatting before I turned on the recording, and I asked him if he'd been down to Australia, and you haven't been down to Australia yet. So,
but I'm looking forward to coming.
One day. Shifting to the life of a scientist and humanist, Dr. Laszlo received the Saul Burns highest degree. In the late 70s and early 90s, Dr. Laszlo ran global projects at the United Nations Institute for Training and Research at the request of the Secretary General. And in the 90s, his research led him to discover the Akashic Field. Dr. Laszlo has been awarded many prizes, as I said before, and nominated for many peace prizes, including the Nobel Peace Prize in 2004 and 2005. In 2019, he was cited as one of 100 most spiritually influential living people in the world, according to the Watkins Mind, Body, Spirit magazine. And he's a member of numerous scientific bodies, elected member of the Hungary Academy of Science in 2010. In 2020, was cited amongst the world's most inspiring people on a list in another magazine. A native to Budapest in the US, citizen. He lives with Carita. Is that how you say it again? His
Yes.
Finnish-born wife in Tuscany in Italy. And you can read more about Dr. Laszlo's accolades. Yeah, I really didn't go into all the awards. They were listed in the bio, but I didn't go into it, at the LaszloInstitute.com or at irvinlaszlobooks.com. Wow. when did you move from Hungary? How old were you when you moved from Hungary and started traveling the world?
15.
You were 15.
15 years old, yes.
Did you move? Did you
So
do that by yourself?
It was after, no, my mother came with me. My father came after that, but it was already the Iron Curtain, between East and West. Hungary was at the beginning, at that point, just under communist rule.
Mm-hmm.
So he couldn't come right away. My mother could come because I was named as a part of the Hungarian team to an international music competition in Geneva. When I got the grand prize there, then I could go on. And because I was a minor, being 15 years old, I was allowed to have my mother accompany me. Then I got to America eventually, and then I stayed in America and came back to Europe. It was a varied kind of life.
Incredible, incredible. And how old were you when you started to stop thinking about music and start thinking about science? What was happening?
I mean, it came parallel. I was a heavy heritage, family heritage, you might say, because my mother was a piano teacher. She wanted to be a concert pianist herself. She was an excellent piano teacher. And my uncle was a philosopher. And so I got both music lessons in the morning, practicing with my mother and having long walks in the park with my uncle, who talked to me about his ideas. So I grew up with both, but first the music side won out. And then when I'm in my mid-20s, when I got married and I had a child, and I began to think more seriously, what should I do about life? What is my life like? What is my purpose? Then I turned back to these philosophical questions that my uncle was talking about. And then I decided to devote myself to philosophy. I started writing books. It was another long story. But in fact, in my mid-20s, then I switched over from music as a profession into being an academic, a professor of philosophy in the United States first, in Yale, and then Princeton, then the New York University, and with guest professorships at Houston and in Chicago. So anyway, that was the second part of my life career, the academic part.
And you're not slowing down. You're 90 next year, right? You're turning 90 next year.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you're not slowing down because you're doing the Higher Self Expo, and I was seeing you speak with Deepak Chopra on his, at the beginning of the year, you two were having a conversation on his show, and you've been doing many other shows. So you're not slowing down at all. When did you?
Well, I just finished yesterday a new book, a small book of 100 pages, but I'm very, very pleased with that, and it should be published in a couple of weeks now. Become on the internet through Amazon and other sites, which is called Upshift: Meeting the Challenge, where I'm discussing, what the next step could be, how to reconstruct ourselves to a better world, of getting past the pandemic and the crisis of employment and climate change and all that.
Mm.
So of course I'm having that, and plus I have two other books coming out at the same time called the Wisdom Principles. We're published in September. And the other one is actually a little autobiography called My Journey.
Oh, fabulous. I love autobiographies. I love people's stories. When was it that you started to think about how you could greatly affect this world rather than just think about philosophy? Because I think we can get lost in thought, and then we look out into the world and we think, wow, stuff needs to change. How can I be an agent of change?
Well, that was what I call my last reincarnation or reincarnation, because first as a musician, I say this in this little autobiography. In my musician, I had a first incarnation was as a concert pianist. Then I shifted over and moved my focus of attention and moved all my aspiration and daily work into philosophy, and philosophy of science and philosophy of society. And then this was in my late 20s and 30s. Then in the 1970s, in my late 40s, I have got an invitation to go to Princeton to give some seminars on the application of my theories, systems theories, to the international system, to the international order or disorder. And I accepted that. And that led me eventually to the Club of Rome and to the United Nations. And that became then another focus of my life, my reincarnation, as it were, which I call the activist phase. I try to write now and focus my ideas in such a way that it will make a difference to people's lives and perhaps also to our common future. Because we need guidance, and the guidance comes not from outside, it comes from inside us. I try to provide whatever comes to me, which I believe is also coming to me in some form, being suggested to me from some other higher level, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
But I try to phrase that, I try to put that out, and those are the publications and the lectures that I'm doing these days, including then the expo that we'll be doing here.
Mm. Yes, and in the 90s, it says here that you discovered, your research led you to discover the Akashic Field. What was happening during that time, and what do you call the Akashic Field? What is it exactly?
Well, I always had an intuition.
Mm-hmm.
The world as we perceive, with our senses, the everyday world, that there is something deeper than that. There is some source, some origin that is deeper. And then when I started reading up in philosophy, of course, you have all the great Hellenic philosophers talk about this Platonic realm of the forms and ideas. And the one that Plotinus talked about. And then, of course, science in the late 20th century started talking about the unified field, a rock bottom, as it were, a basis out of which things emerge and come. And this parallels the insights of great Indian yogis like Vivekananda, who talked about the Akasha as the basis of the other dimensions of air, water, and fire and earth. But the Akasha is primary. It's the ground for all of those things, a deeper dimension. So I saw it first in philosophical tradition, then in spirituality, and then in science, especially now in quantum science. You find that they talk about the unified quantum field, which is the universe in its original form, and the actual universe is emerging out of that. This deeper realm is what the quantum physicist David Bohm called the implicate order, whereas we live and perceive the explicate order. But the deeper order is there below it all. So I was aware of the fact that 3,500 years ago, the Hindu seers talked about the Akasha as the deep dimension. So I said, yes, this deep dimension, to make it popular, to make it known to people and understand easily, let's call it the Akashic Field, because it's the dimension of the Akasha. And to us, everything that comes to us from the universe, it comes as a form of a field. All things are connected to one another as in a field, And so all our experiences actually constitute a field. Then I started talking about the Akashic Field as the grand unified field, which physicists talked about, or grand unified theories, they talked about. And then this caught on. People appreciated this idea, wanted to know more about it. So I wrote a book in 2004, the new edition again in 2007, and I wrote some articles. And now last year, my publisher wanted me to address this because there were so many inquiries coming in from people about my latest concepts. What do I think of the Akashic Field? So I then wrote a little book again, which was now published a few months ago as the immutable laws of the Akashic Field.
So is the word Akasha an Indian word, the Akashic?
Yes.
And what does it mean exactly? Unification, does it mean unified?
The Akasha is the deep dimension, is the
It's-
fifth dimension.
It's the
In the
fifth
fourth dimension in which you live the air, water, earth, fire. But the deep dimension, which is the origin of all of these things, is the Akasha dimension. It's called the Akasha, you know. So to me, all these things that are the most important fertile concept in science is the concept of field. Einstein also discovered that and said that already decades and decades ago. Everything can be conceived as a field. So if you talk about the Akasha as a dimension, for us, it manifests itself as a field, as a deep original field. It's the source behind it all.
Yeah. Because, you know, in the spiritual New Age community, people channel the Akashic Records, you know, it's called the Akashic Records, which is like the library of knowledge of the lives that you've led in different you know, time and space. So it's the same thing. It's the same.
Well, I say, you know, in this little book on the immutable laws of the Akashic Field, I say that there are three paramount important laws of this Akashic Field, and one of them is connection. Everything is connected directly through this field, so everything impacts on everything else. Whatever I do impacts not only on you but on the rest of the world practically. The second law is memory. Everything remains, nothing vanishes completely, and that talks about the Akashic Records. Because Akashic Records means that whatever happened to you, whatever lives you have led, whatever experiences you have had, altogether whatever happened in the world is someplace recorded. It's recorded in this unified field, which we call the Akashic Field. And the third one is an evolutionary trend, which is in this field from the Big Bang, you know, 13.8 billion years ago, to up to today and moving on, as the universe evolves further and further, creating more and more coherent structures, planets, planetary systems, stellar systems, constellations, galaxies, the Meta Galaxy. So these are the basic characteristics of the Akashic Field. And in my new book, I describe each one of these in more detail.
What's the name of your new book?
The Immutable Laws of the Akashic Field.
The Immutable Laws of the Akashic Field.
It's available now through the internet by Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all the other booksellers.
So you know that you're being inspired from another part of you, another dimension within the field. When did you become aware of that? Because I know most scientists are thinking that all the inspiration they get comes from them actually logically working out stuff. When did you?
Not all scientists, you know. Einstein said that intuition is more important than logic. You see, rationality. And I think great scientists such as Jung and Schrödinger and you know, Pauli and all the other scientists, or we could name a lot of them. Now there's also David Bohm. They all emphasize the importance of intuition. And it comes, where does it come from, you know? I try to say that, yes, it comes not from the surface dimension, which is how things appear. It comes from this deeper dimension, where all the information is already stored. It's all there. It's implicated. It's folded in, as Bohm would say, you know. But whatever it is, it's given already. Everything, all the laws of the universe, the way it evolves, are given in that deeper dimension. They are Akashic laws. They are laws of the Akashic Field.
And do you think that modern scientists today are on board with this across the board, or do you think it's just a handful of people that have come to this conclusion? Because I know people that channel and are in the spiritual community are totally up for this, but then there's the scientific community that don't kind of want to talk too much about being inspired by your intuition. Do you think that that's changing?
Well, there is, we can talk about old paradigm and new paradigm. There's a traditional paradigm, which is positivist, in terms of philosophy, is based on Newton's laws, but it's kind of says that nothing else exists but matter moving around in passive space and indifferent time, and according to mechanical eternal laws. And that's the old paradigm where according to nothing else exists. You don't know where to put consciousness. Mind is not locatable. You can't put inside the old paradigm view of the world. So what I'm doing, I have been doing in my books, also my latest book now, I describe the old paradigm and the new paradigm. And you see how we can shift over. I also founded this institute, research institute, where there are researchers actively working on different aspects of the new paradigm. Because this new paradigm is what is coming forth from quantum physics, the quantum cosmology, the quantum biology. And eventually, I'm working in sort of quantum consciousness research as well. So it's a whole new ball game, as it were. It's a whole new story.
It is a new ball game, but at the same time, quantum theory was being discussed within the scientific community 70 odd years ago, or even 100 years ago. And yet we're only just kind of getting up with the program now, like in 2021. Why do you think it's taken so long for it to
Well, we didn't have the experimental basis. We didn't have the observations that the new instruments have. Non-locality, it emerged already in the 1970s, where it was in the 1980s that it could be tested, really, that things are connected instantly across space and time. And the whole cosmological notions of quantum physics, as they emerged, first in the Copenhagen interpretation of Niels Bohr, but then also in other fields developed in Russia and the United States. So quantum physics came into its own on the basis of physical experiments, starting in the 1970s, 1980s. And now that we can use the new information technologies for computation, you can beginning to see how this whole universe is a strongly interconnected system, a quantum system, how all parts are influencing all other parts. Whereas we know it intuitively, and of course, in some sense, we also have known about this. There was the idea of holism that's provided, that's pioneered by Jan Smuts, the South African statesman, who wrote this beautiful book in the beginning of the 19th century, or late 19th century, actually, about holism in the world. But as you say, it was there, the ideas were there, but they didn't catch on until a few decades ago, more and more. And I think now the new paradigm in physics is becoming the new paradigm of science altogether. It's not the Newtonian paradigm. It's very, very different from what you can call the classical paradigm.
It's exciting where we can go once we really establish this as our sort of collective truth. Because I think it's still fringe, even though it's widely researched and widely talked about, it's not widely held as reality in the minds of the collective.
Well, I've just finished a chapter in this new book, it's called sort of a little bit provocatively. It says, the real world is not what you thought it was. And that's this last part of the book is devoted to that. And then I'm describing precisely how our ideas of what the world is like have changed through the new sciences.
Absolutely.
And I think an irreversible change, once you move on this way, you're not going to move back. But it does take a while for the whole science community to come on board. It's a process. But the new crisis that we lived through, the pandemic, and the climate crisis, all of these demonstrate how the incredible sensitivity of this system, which we call humanity, to its environment, and how every part of the system is interconnected to every other part. So all of these things, it used to be philosophy, used to be speculative, spirituality. are now moving into the mainstream because we are living a highly interconnected, basically a quantum universe where all things interact with all other things. And they jointly move. There's a dynamism in that. It's, and not long ago, a couple of decades ago, science, the main paradigm was that the universe is the result of random interactions.
Right.
So a lot of things happen, one dancing after another, as they used to say. But there's no purpose behind it, or no deeper direction. And that has fallen by the wayside. Not everybody realizes this, of course, but the fact is that you couldn't generate the world that we actually observe and live in, including ourselves, in the time available, 13.8 billion years since the Big Bang. You couldn't even generate the DNA of a fruit fly in that time, purely by random interactions. Randomness is no longer the case.
Mm-hmm.
Fred Hoyle, the great mathematical physicist, says that in the universe, the coherence comes about the universe. The probability of a coherent universe would come about is similar to the probability that a hurricane blowing through a scrapyard would assemble a working airplane. You see, imagine a hurricane assembling a working airplane through the scrapyard.
Yeah.
It's not impossible, because if you get a sufficient long time, anything will happen. But in the time that we have available, even though it seems billions of years, seems a lot, it's not long enough for this incredible complexity to emerge that we have now in the universe, So we must assume that there is something more, and that something more is in that deep dimension, is in the Akashic dimension.
Mm. Yeah, all things are possible. Years ago, I read in the Seth books, channeled material that came through in the 60s. There are only two rules to life. One, you create your own reality. And two, everything is possible, or anything is possible. There are no limits. And I think that science is starting to explain that now, that there are no limits once you get into
not everything is possible. There are what you call laws of nature. Otherwise, it will be a random universe, you see. And then random interaction couldn't generate this universe that we have. Einstein said that the most amazing things about the universe is that it's so coherent.
Mm-hmm.
We can find coherence, Otherwise, it would be just one thing after another, and we wouldn't know the rhyme and reason, and we wouldn't know how this has all come about. Mm-hmm. We don't have hurricanes blowing through scrapyards all the time. That's not enough. So this coherence in the world, creating coherent systems, is a basic attribute to the universe. In system sciences, when I have a complex system that has some internal laws built into it, you talk about attractors. The chaotic attractors, or strange attractors, or periodic attractors, etc., point attractors. So I'm saying that there is an attractor operating in the universe, which is a law. Mm-hmm. The law of all laws, Mm-hmm. All things move in such a direction that there is a preferred direction, which is towards creating complex systems that have a higher and higher level of coherence. This is what has been happening since the Big Bang, and it continues to happen, even though there is a lot of chaos in that system, a lot of noise, as it were, but underneath it all, there is a coherence coming about. And that's a hope, by the way, is to find that coherence, to find that impulse towards organization and order. That's how we can move past the tremendous challenges that we now face for our individual as well as collective survival.
Yeah. So you're saying that as we move through time and space, through history, that we're ever evolving, that entropy is not the major force, it's more syntropy. There is this syntropy evolving, and so we're always evolving to the next better level, even when everything looks like chaos. And like we're in this time, this precipice, this time of great chaos at the moment with stuff, and people are very pessimistic. They're like, what's going on? The world looks like it's getting worse, not better. but really there are laws that says it can only go in one direction, and that is this syntropy, like moving, getting more and more.
Yes, because the universe is not a finite physical system. You see, it's constantly interacting with this deeper dimension. David Bohm talks about the explicate order being informed, with a hyphen, written with a hyphen, informed by the implicate order, the deeper dimension. Plato, of course, 2,500 years ago, said the same thing, basically. You know, that our forms, the ideas, our love, soul are forming what is happening in the world. So there is this idea of it wasn't Newton's idea. Marx talks about Newton's philosophy. Newton was a mystic. He was a highly spiritual person.
Yeah.
He came across these laws, and then his followers extolled the laws and made them into universal phenomena. Nothing else exists but the laws. Newton talked about matter as being somehow, matter itself is not part of this universe. It's a deeper source. But these followers just purified his thinking and they sterilized it, actually. And then we created a mechanical world, a world of like a mechanism where we can manipulate it. And that was the world built on the Newtonian, Darwinian paradigm, which is now, I think, gradually falling apart. You see, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Laszlo, you've lived through a lot. You've seen a lot happen in the world. And you talk about, I've been watching some of your conversations on other people's podcast shows. As I say, you're still incredibly active, saying, you seem to say yes to, anyone that's reaching out, which I really respect. I really respect that. And you talk about us being in this, like, do you think that this time on Earth is unlike any other time that you've seen in your lifetime?
Yeah, well, everything is always moving onwards. That is a tipping points, but these are not political tipping points like the Second World War was, was an aggressive intent of a great power created it's also World War II, and even World War I, and then World War II. But now it's not a political, it's an ecological and a social and also even a spiritual crisis.
Yeah.
It's a transformation. It's a process of deep-seated transformation, which is about time, because the world we have created in the past couple of hundred years is not a sustainable world. It would lead to increasing crisis and tensions. So it's time that's that's a shock. And what is it? What's happening? Where can we go from here? Yeah. So get that information into that shock. Then you have the butterfly effects. Then you have a little butterfly moving its wings and can shift, can create a storm. Or I have a small group of people, like Margaret Mead said, can change the world. Nothing else ever did. So we're at a time when we are in this chaos system moving toward a resolution of some kind, either breakdown or a resolution. That's a true bifurcation. But we can be moving toward a positive future if we just realize that this is a deeper impetus in the universe. It's there, it's in society, it's in each human being, and that if we listen to it, it's a guide, it's a satellite, it's a GPS that can move us into the natural direction instead of all these artificial short-term power and wealth-hungry directions, which are destroying the overall system in favor of a small minority. You've got to learn that. You have to look at the whole system. And this is a chance to have a learning. We have a big learning experience. That's what we're having.
Absolutely. So how do you think this knowledge and the understanding of this knowledge, the Akashic Field, the unified field, quantum theory, how do you think it'll change our world?
I think it'll make us more recognize that we are connected, and the direction we can go is to take care of the overall system. We are part of the web of life on this planet. And if we destroy the web of life, we destroy our environment and we destroy ourselves. So look at the overall system. all of humanity embedded in the biosphere. That's our pointer. That's our point of reference. Whereas we were always looking at our own nation state, our own enterprise, our own city or region or nation as being the point of reference. And we are optimizing that. We are trying to get the maximum out of that, maximum power over the others, competing with a single goal in mind, a single system in mind. That has to change, getting a more holistic, more quantum, more integral view, which is coming about in medicine, the new medicine, is moving, alternative medicine is moving in that direction. New lifestyles, instinctively, intuitively. Everything is already moving in that direction, just to keep our eyes open and join the positive trends.
I just wanted to ask you, Deepak was saying that as he gets older, he feels even more passionate to get his work out there before he leaves this world. And I feel like you're doing the same thing. You're even more passionate about getting your work out there before you leave this world too. Is that how you're feeling?
Well, I'm trying to get as much out as soon as possible. In general, I think we are at the critical point, at a tipping point, and all this can provide that critical push that the cyberneticians talk about, the critical kick, and a crucial kick they talk about, which can change the whole system, you see. And it's possible now with ideas, you can change the system, because now there is an openness to something new. We know it's no good to continue the way we have been. So I'm trying to get things out as well. Yes, you're right in that.
And I wanted to ask you one more question before you go. What do you see happening in our future? Have you thought about what a future can look like? Like, have you thought about a society? Do you want to just give us a little glimpse of what you see?
Well, that's also the last part of the new little book that I'm writing. I'll talk about 2050 as a point of reference. Suppose, optimistically, that we have upshifted our ideas and our organization. 2050 is a more holistic world. Then there's a great deal of detail that we can say about social, political organization, about the ecological relationships, about the way we handle our own individual selves within the family and with each other and within communities. I can't really say that in so many words in detail, but it's a more holistic, more systemic, more sustainable world. We can create it. Seems like utopia now, but the alternative to that is breakdown. And I do believe that instead of breakdown, we will be breaking through, because this impetus, this force of evolution is in us, is with us, and we can go with it. So I have this deep-seated optimism, but it's not just a passive optimism, sit back and everything will work out, but it's an active optimism, what I call a possibilism. We have a possibility, we have to act on it. That's the task.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today on Accentuate the Positive Media, and thank you for being a part of the Higher Self Expo. I look forward to hearing your presentation during the Expo. You're a part of the European section of the Expo. I'm co-hosting the Australasian section of the Expo, and I think Tanya and Rui will be your host for the European part. And your books sound fascinating. And thank you for all the work that you've done in this world. And can't thank you enough.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for taking up these ideas and disseminating them. It's in the common interest. It's in our joint best interest. So thank you again, and all the best. And see you there.
Bye. Short and sweet, that one. I was warned that Dr. Laszlo doesn't talk for a long time. He does tend to stretch himself and put himself on many different podcast shows, and I felt a little inadequate talking to him, actually. I'm kind of like my scientific prowess is, I didn't feel so adequate. He's just been awarded. You should see his bio. I didn't read out half of it, not even a third of it, with all the awards that he has had. But I don't know why I felt inadequate. But a lifetime of thinking about this stuff. I could have probed him a bit further. But yeah, he's, hitting 90. And I really felt like he's trying to get as much out there, philosophy books, information out there. And Deepak, he has said the same thing, that he wants to, the older he gets, the more he feels like he needs to hurry to get all these ideas out of his head and into literature and on podcast shows and stuff like that. But fascinating to talk to Dr. Laszlo. What a legend. An absolute legend, honestly. He's got a great TED talk talking about all this stuff. I was watching it today. It's about 8 years old now. If you go onto YouTube and put in Dr. Laszlo, you will see his TED talk there. What was he saying on the TED talk? I can't remember. I was researching him today, and yeah, my head is full of information. All right, I'm going to leave it there. This is one of the shortest shows I've ever done, but it's late here because it's like the middle of the morning for him in Italy, and it's night here in Australia. So it's not the usual time I do the shows. But anyway, the lighting's looking good, isn't it? I managed to get the lighting happening in the night. Thanks again for listening and watching, and I hope you tune in to the Higher Self Expo. We're streaming live for 24 hours. It is going to be live on my YouTube channel. It'll be on the Higher Self Expo YouTube channel as well, but I think Zane's going to stream it live on my YouTube channel too. So it'll be going for 24 hours on my YouTube channel and Facebook pages, the Higher Self Expo Facebook pages. The thing about the platform that we're using is that wherever you comment, wherever you're watching it on Facebook or YouTube, we see all the comments that come in. It collects all the comments into one place. Technology. Don't you love it when it does that? It gives us an opportunity to come together and discuss this stuff. Technology has its purpose. So tune in, ask some questions, leave your comments, and 36 amazing speakers from around the world. This is the last conversation I'm having before we go live this weekend. And then I'm talking to people that aren't speakers of the Higher Self Expo. After this, I will probably speak to more of the speakers later on down the track, because I didn't get around to speaking to all 36. But I did speak to everyone that was in the Australasian 8-hour period, whether I spoke to them recently or I've had them on the show previously. And as I said, it was just fascinating to speak to Dr. Laszlo. Fascinating. All right, I'm going to go. Thanks again for listening and watching, and sign up if you want to the Inner Sanctum, if you want to continue these conversations on a weekly basis with myself and our little tribe. It's only a small group of people that discuss these things and get out there and make stuff happen. And yes, remember to get the book Awakened by Death if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.